Chosen One. The story closes with a quiet shift inside your spirit. What once felt confusing now begins settling into clarity. You understand that this long season of silence was never a curse, never a sign that God had withdrawn from your life, and never evidence that you were being forgotten. It was a divine strategy. Heaven did not speak this message to the crowd because the crowd could not carry the weight of what God is doing. This word was meant for you because the assignment placed on your life is deeply personal, sacred, and specific. The work God has been doing within you required privacy, patience, and protection. What He has been forming is too delicate to expose prematurely, and too powerful to be handled by careless voices. Now you see that the isolation surrounding your life was not abandonment, but trust. God trusted you enough to pull you aside, to quiet the noise around you, and to shape your character where only He could see the full process. The drifting people, the uncomfortable conversations, and the growing distance from shallow spaces were not random changes. They were signs that heaven was rearranging your life from the inside out. You were not buried to disappear. You were buried so that you could rise stronger. And now something has shifted. In the unseen realm, movement has already begun. Doors that once remained closed will soon open with unmistakable clarity. Burdens that weighed heavily on your heart will begin to lift. Yet your role is not to explain, prove, or announce anything. Your role is to remain close to God, steady and obedient. The next chapter will reveal itself when heaven decides the time is right, and when it does, it will be undeniable proof that God was working in your life the entire time. Chosen One. The turning point of your story did not happen in a loud moment where everyone could see it. It happened quietly, in a place where only God could witness the decision you made within your heart. There was a season when the weight of betrayal, disappointment, silence, and delay gathered around your life in ways that felt deeply personal. People you trusted failed you. Situations you believed would move forward suddenly stalled. Prayers that you hoped would bring quick answers seemed to echo in silence. From the outside, those moments may have appeared like ordinary struggles, but in the unseen realm, something far more significant was taking place. The enemy assumed that those pressures would reshape you. The expectation was simple. Pain would eventually harden your heart. Betrayal would make you suspicious. Disappointment would make you cynical. Silence from heaven would convince you that your faith had been misplaced. These are the points where many people quietly walk away from the path they once believed in. They stop trusting, stop praying, and stop expecting anything good to come from their obedience. Darkness relies on this predictable pattern. When pain reaches a certain intensity, most people eventually surrender to bitterness. Chosen One. The enemy expected that same outcome from you. The circumstances surrounding your life seemed perfectly arranged to produce it. You were placed in situations where anger would have been understandable, where withdrawing from faith would have seemed reasonable, and where protecting your heart through hardness would have looked like wisdom. Everything about the environment around you suggested that bitterness was the natural response. Yet something unusual happened. Instead of becoming bitter, you chose forgiveness. Instead of closing your heart, you continued to love. Instead of abandoning your faith, you continued to pray, even when answers seemed distant. These choices may have felt small in the moment. From your perspective, you were simply trying to survive another difficult season. You were holding on to the last thread of hope because letting go felt even more painful. But Chosen One, heaven saw something far deeper. What looked like a private decision within your heart became a spiritual declaration that echoed through the unseen realm. At the exact point where many people break, you remained surrendered. Where bitterness expected to grow, you planted mercy. Where discouragement expected to silence you, you whispered another prayer. The enemy had anticipated a collapse, yet what occurred instead was obedience. This moment surprised the unseen realm because it is rare. Many people begin their spiritual journey with enthusiasm and faith, but when hardship arrives, their perspective changes. Pain has a way of revealing what truly lives inside a person's heart. When trust is wounded and hope is delayed, people often retreat into self-protection. Your story followed a different path. Chosen one, heaven was not watching to see whether you would perform perfectly. God was watching the condition of your heart. Even when your strength felt thin and your understanding incomplete, you chose surrender. You did not always know why certain doors closed or why certain battles lasted longer than expected. Yet instead of abandoning God in confusion, you remained open to Him. In the quiet places where no one else could see you, those choices mattered deeply. Forgiveness, offered when anger would have been easier, became an act of spiritual authority. Prayer whispered during silence became a declaration that faith was still alive. Love extended after betrayal became proof that darkness had not succeeded in reshaping your identity. Chosen one, heaven is moved not by outward perfection, but by the direction of the heart. Your obedience in private moments revealed something sacred. You demonstrated that your relationship with God was not based solely on comfort or visible success. It was rooted in trust. Even when circumstances failed to explain themselves, you remained connected to the one guiding your life. Those private decisions did not disappear into silence. Each one planted something powerful in the spiritual ground beneath your life. At the time, you believed you were simply enduring another hard season, doing whatever was necessary to keep moving forward. Yet every act of obedience, no matter how small it seemed, became a seed placed into the soil of your future. Chosen one, seeds are often planted during the most unremarkable moments. A farmer does not see immediate results after placing a seed into the earth. The field remains unchanged on the surface, and for a while, nothing visible suggests that growth has begun. Yet beneath the soil, life slowly awakens. Roots begin stretching downward, drawing strength from the ground around them. The same process has been unfolding within your life. When you chose patience instead of resentment, a seed of endurance was planted. When you responded with integrity while under pressure, a seed of character entered the soil. When you prayed through silence instead of abandoning faith, a seed of spiritual strength took root beneath the surface. Each of these seeds carried potential far beyond the moment when it was planted. A single decision to remain faithful during hardship may have felt small to you at the time. Yet heaven recognizes that those decisions shape the future in ways that cannot always be measured immediately. Seeds do not produce fruit overnight. They grow slowly, strengthening beneath the surface before revealing their presence above the ground. Chosen one, every act of goodness you practiced while weary became part of that hidden growth. When you encouraged someone, even though your own heart felt tired, you planted kindness into the soil of your destiny. When you remained honest during moments when compromise would have been easier, you planted integrity. When you chose humility rather than retaliation, you planted wisdom. Those seeds were not scattered randomly. They were placed carefully into the spiritual ground surrounding your life. Even the prayers you offered when words felt weak were not wasted. Heaven heard them and preserved them. The moments when you spoke to God through silence carried just as much value as the moments when you prayed with clear language. Chosen one, God now reveals something important. None of these seeds were forgotten. What you planted through obedience has been stored in heaven for the appointed time. The spiritual ground beneath your life has been quietly transforming because of those decisions. While you wondered whether your efforts mattered, growth was already taking place where your eyes could not see it. The enemy cannot steal what was planted through obedience. Seeds rooted in faith grow in territory that darkness cannot easily reach. Because they were watered by hidden pain and strengthened by quiet perseverance, their foundation is deeper than the circumstances that once threatened them. What is growing now is the result of every unseen moment when you chose faith over despair. Each act of patience has strengthened the roots beneath your life. Each prayer offered through silence has added nourishment to that hidden field. Each choice to love despite disappointment has expanded the ground where your future will rise. Chosen one, the growth unfolding beneath the surface will eventually become visible. Seeds that remain hidden for a time are not lost. They are preparing for a season when their fruit can be seen clearly. The strength forming in your spirit today comes directly from the decisions you made when no one else was watching. Heaven remembers every one of those moments, and what you planted in obedience is now beginning to rise into the life God prepared for you long before those struggles ever began.
Chosen one, as your obedience continued quietly beneath the surface of your life, something significant began unfolding in the unseen realm that you could not yet fully perceive. At first, the enemy believed the strategy being used against you would eventually succeed, because betrayal, disappointment, delay, and spiritual silence are tools that have broken countless hearts before yours. These pressures are often designed to slowly reshape a person's inner world, wearing down their faith until trust begins to feel pointless and prayer begins to feel empty. Darkness assumed that if enough weight was placed on your life for long enough, your heart would eventually follow the predictable path many people walk when pain reaches a certain threshold. The expectation was simple and familiar. Betrayal would cause you to withdraw from trusting people. Disappointment would push you into discouragement. Silence from heaven would convince you that your prayers had lost their power. The enemy anticipated that one of these moments would finally become the turning point, where you chose self-protection instead of surrender. Yet something unusual began happening instead, something that slowly unsettled the strategies designed against you. When betrayal appeared, your heart did not turn cold in the way darkness expected. When disappointment came, you did not abandon prayer, even when your voice felt tired. When answers delayed longer than you hoped, you continued seeking God instead of walking away from Him. This response created confusion in the unseen realm because your reactions did not follow the pattern that pain usually produces in human hearts. Many people begin their spiritual journey with passion and faith, but when hardship stretches longer than expected, their perspective changes. Pain often reveals what truly anchors a person's spirit, and when the pressure becomes intense enough, bitterness often begins to take root where trust once lived. The enemy assumed that the same transformation would happen inside you, yet the opposite occurred. Instead of hardening, your heart became wiser. Instead of withdrawing, your faith became deeper. Instead of closing yourself to God, you leaned more closely toward Him in the moments when understanding felt most distant. Once darkness realized that pain could not reshape your heart, a quiet panic began forming behind the scenes. The enemy had expected you to respond the way most people do when their expectations collapse, yet your spirit remained anchored in obedience. When that became clear, the strategy surrounding your life shifted. If pain could not break your faith directly, perhaps prolonged pressure could wear down your endurance instead. This is the moment when the resistance around your life began increasing in ways that felt confusing from your perspective. You may have noticed that situations which once seemed straightforward suddenly became complicated. Moments when clarity should have appeared instead carried strange confusion. Opportunities that felt close enough to reach suddenly delayed without explanation. At times, an unusual spiritual heaviness seemed to appear without a visible cause, leaving you wondering whether something in your life had quietly gone wrong. These experiences often make people believe they are failing, yet heaven now reveals that these pressures were not signs of defeat. They were reactions. Darkness had begun recognizing that your obedience was becoming dangerous. Every time you chose forgiveness instead of bitterness, every time you prayed instead of giving up, and every time you remained surrendered instead of becoming cynical, something powerful was being built beneath the surface of your life. Faith was becoming stronger than circumstance, and that kind of foundation cannot easily be dismantled once it is formed. Because the enemy sensed that your spiritual roots were growing deeper, the pressure increased in an attempt to exhaust your spirit before the growth could become visible. This is why the season you walked through felt unusually intense, as though the road became harder precisely when you believed your obedience should have made it easier. Many people misinterpret this moment and assume that greater difficulty must mean they have made a wrong turn. Heaven reveals the opposite truth. Pressure does not always indicate failure. In many cases, pressure appears because a breakthrough has already been released in the spirit, and the enemy is attempting to delay what cannot ultimately be stopped. When God authorizes a shift in someone's life, the unseen realm often reacts before visible change appears in the physical world. Darkness cannot always cancel what God has already declared, yet it will try to slow it down by introducing confusion, distraction, or emotional fatigue. That is exactly what began happening around your life. The resistance you felt was not proof that you were losing ground. It was evidence that something irreversible had already begun unfolding in the spirit, long before you could see the results. Because of this, you must not misread the season you have just passed through. The battle became harder not because your obedience failed, but because your obedience had already activated something powerful. The enemy sensed that your life was approaching a moment of transition and reacted with urgency, hoping that increased pressure might pull you back before the shift could fully unfold. Yet even during those moments of uncertainty, you continued moving forward in faith, and that choice led directly into the next truth heaven now reveals. The difficult moment you recently passed through was never random suffering. It was the final proving ground before acceleration. In every calling, there comes a season when pressure reaches its peak, because heaven is watching to see how a person's heart responds under real weight. These moments are not designed to destroy someone's faith, but to reveal its authenticity. They become the place where obedience is tested, where surrender proves whether it is rooted in comfort or in genuine trust. From your perspective, the situation may have looked like another exhausting chapter, another obstacle that seemed unnecessary. Yet in heaven's eyes, it carried extraordinary significance. The enemy believed that this test would finally be the one to break you. The circumstances were arranged in a way that seemed perfectly designed to push your spirit into discouragement. The silence stretched long enough to challenge your patience. The pressure felt strong enough to weaken your resolve, and the confusion was deep enough to make anyone question whether they had misunderstood their path. Yet even in that moment, you did not walk away from God. Your faith remained imperfect yet sincere, and your heart remained surrendered even when answers were unclear. That decision confirmed something important in heaven. It proved that your obedience was not dependent on favorable circumstances. It demonstrated that your trust in God did not disappear when comfort disappeared. Your response showed that your relationship with Him was anchored in something deeper than immediate understanding. Throughout history, the narrow road has always produced rare people, individuals who continue walking forward even when the path becomes difficult to explain. Many people begin with strong intentions, yet when hardship intensifies, they step away from obedience because the cost feels too high. The narrow road shapes a different kind of character. It forms people whose faith remains steady under pressure, people who can carry responsibility without becoming consumed by pride or fear. Because you remained surrendered during that difficult moment, heaven recognized that your heart could be trusted with more. The unseen realm observed the decision you made when no one else was watching, and that decision became the confirmation that your life was ready for the next stage of movement. Passing this test did not mean the journey suddenly became effortless, but it did mean that acceleration had begun. Acceleration rarely arrives in the way people expect. It does not always begin with immediate celebration or visible success. Often, it starts with disruption, sudden changes, or unexpected separations that rearrange familiar parts of life. Doors that once refused to move may begin opening quickly, while other doors close just as suddenly because they no longer belong to the direction your life is taking. Relationships may shift as new alignments begin forming around your purpose. At first, these changes can feel unsettling because acceleration often requires the landscape of your life to be rearranged before the new path becomes fully visible. Yet every movement that follows will connect directly to the obedience you demonstrated during your hidden battles.
The faith you carried when no one understood your struggle is now preparing the ground for what comes next. You passed the test that darkness believed would finally defeat you, and because of that moment of surrender, heaven is now setting the stage for the next chapter of your journey to unfold with clarity and purpose. Chosen one, the moment you aligned your heart with God in that painful decision, something began shifting immediately in the unseen realm, even though nothing around you appeared to change at first. From your perspective, it may have felt like just another difficult day, another moment where you chose faith even though your emotions were tired and your understanding incomplete. Yet heaven saw it differently. The instant you chose surrender instead of bitterness, obedience instead of withdrawal, and trust instead of resentment, movement began quietly unfolding behind the scenes of your life. God did not wait for applause or recognition to begin responding to your obedience. The unseen realm reacted the moment your heart aligned with Him. Paths that had been closed began slowly adjusting. Conversations that had nothing to do with you yet started moving in directions that would eventually affect your future. Opportunities that did not yet exist began forming through people who had not even heard your name. While you believed you were simply surviving another painful moment, heaven had already begun arranging the next season around the faith you demonstrated. Chosen one, this is how God often works when obedience is tested in private. The visible world moves slowly, but the spiritual realm begins shifting immediately. What looks like stillness on the surface can actually be a season of intense preparation beneath it. Doors that once seemed locked begin quietly unlocking through circumstances you cannot yet see. Favor starts gathering around your life through people who will eventually cross your path. Situations that once blocked your progress begin losing their power as God rearranges the landscape of your future. You may not have noticed these movements because they began outside the range of your immediate awareness. God often builds the next chapter of someone's life in places far beyond their current environment. While you were praying, healing, and remaining faithful through hardship, heaven was already placing the pieces of your next season into position. People who carry alignment with your purpose are being guided closer to your path. Opportunities that will require the strength you gained through your struggles are slowly being prepared. At the same time, the connections that once limited your growth are beginning to move aside. Relationships that belonged only to earlier chapters of your life are gradually fading. Some doors that once seemed important are quietly closing because they cannot carry the weight of the direction God is leading you. What once felt like loss is actually part of the rearrangement taking place around you. God is clearing space for the new structure He intends to build. Chosen one, this process includes the introduction of new access and new clarity. The confusion that surrounded certain parts of your journey will begin lifting as your path becomes more defined. Situations that once felt uncertain will gradually reveal their purpose. Strength you did not realize you possessed will begin appearing when new responsibilities arrive. What you learned through hidden battles will suddenly become useful in ways you never expected. This is the nature of divine preparation. God does not simply reward obedience with comfort. He responds by positioning someone where their growth can finally produce visible impact. Every prayer you whispered during silence, every moment when you chose patience instead of retaliation, and every decision to trust God when your emotions wanted to give up, contributed to this preparation. One day soon, you will look back at the moment that felt like another ordinary, painful day and recognize it as something far more important. The day you thought you were simply enduring hardship was actually the day heaven announced your next season. The decision you made in private triggered movements that had been waiting for your obedience before they could begin. Chosen one, heaven often waits for alignment before releasing acceleration. God allows a person's heart to reveal its true direction before He opens doors that will shape their future. Your painful decision demonstrated that your obedience was genuine, and that sincerity allowed heaven to begin building the next stage of your life. When the changes begin becoming visible, you may notice how quickly certain things start shifting. New people may appear in your life carrying encouragement, wisdom, or opportunities that align with the growth you have experienced. Conversations that once seemed distant from your reality may suddenly include your name. Doors that once required endless effort to move may open with surprising ease. At the same time, some things that once felt stable may disappear more quickly than expected. This is not chaos, it is rearrangement. God is moving the wrong connections and outdated limitations out of the way so that your next season can unfold without interference. Just as a field must be cleared before new growth can appear, certain structures in your life must shift to make room for what is coming. Chosen one, your struggle is no longer leading toward collapse. The season you walked through was not preparing you for defeat, but for testimony. What you endured in silence is becoming the foundation of a story that will eventually encourage others who face similar battles. When people see the peace, wisdom, and strength that now guide your life, they will wonder how such transformation became possible. The answer will be simple but powerful. God was working behind the scenes the entire time. What happened in secret will become visible in ways that cannot be explained by human effort alone. The patience you practiced when no one applauded you will now produce opportunities that reflect divine timing. The faith you carried during silence will now guide you through open doors that once seemed unreachable. Chosen one, this is the moment where your story begins turning from endurance into evidence. The same hardships that once appeared capable of breaking you are becoming part of the testimony that reveals how God preserved your life. Your journey is no longer defined by the pain you survived, but by the transformation that followed it. And when the next season fully arrives, it will be clear to everyone watching that what God has done in your life could never have been created by human strength alone. The conclusion draws the chosen one into a place of holy reassurance. They now understand that what heaven celebrated was not some outward success, but the hidden posture of their heart. God was not impressed by noise, performance, or religious appearance. He was moved by the fact that the chosen ones stayed soft when pain tried to harden them, stayed faithful when silence tried to discourage them, and stayed obedient when quitting would have seemed reasonable. That quiet decision became the moment that shifted everything. Now the chosen one is called to lift their head and prepare their spirit. The script has changed. The enemy no longer controls the outcome he once imagined. The test has been passed. The seeds have been planted, and the spiritual rearrangement has already started. What comes next will not be the continuation of endless struggle, but the beginning of acceleration. The pain of the past season will become the foundation of the next chapter, and the hidden obedience that no one applauded will soon speak louder than their suffering ever did. The story closes with deep hope and prophetic momentum. The chosen one is reminded that they are not ending in delay, confusion, or exhaustion. They are stepping into testimony. God, who watched every tear and recorded every act of hidden faith, is now preparing to reveal a loud reward for their quiet obedience. What they did mattered. Heaven saw it. Angels noticed it. And now their life is about to reflect it.